Video, I'm going to show you how to avoid some very common beginner drawing mistakes and how to develop strong drawing habits from the very start. A lot of learning how to draw goes against our natural instincts, but learning how to recognize the things that our brain wants us to do and reprogramming it to do things differently will guarantee fast results, and anyone can learn how to draw quickly. So, the trick to learning how to draw is to get comfortable following this new thought process and to not allow yourself to get sucked into a system that your brain is naturally going to want you to follow. It can be really challenging at first to get used to this new procedure. However, even the most seasoned artists have to consciously make an effort to remind themselves throughout the drawing process. So it does get a lot easier over time. So don't get discouraged if you find yourself falling into some of these traps throughout the project. So for this lesson, you can draw from any very simple image that doesn't have a lot of detail. I'm going to be using these drawing worksheets that you can find linked below or on my website at insideoutteacher.com. I like to use these practice worksheets for a number of reasons, but number one, because they are smaller scale and they're not intimidating. I also love that I can include the rubric and I could put some reminders on here to help students remember what to look for. So you could use any reference image, but we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first step of this new drawing process is to train your brain to map out where everything goes before you let yourself get the details. So it's really difficult sometimes because your mind is going to want to draw the curves and the shapes and kind of get everything right. But if you can make a conscious effort to get the location or the placement of your shapes and then move on to the next shape before you get that first one looking absolutely perfect, it will help you so much in the long run. So your drawing will go through some stages where it doesn't look great or some things are off, but learning to be okay with that and knowing that you are going to go back to those areas and it's just part of the process to catch those mistakes later takes some getting used to. So as you can see in this sketch, I am really bouncing around and I'm making a super conscious effort to find the location, and I'm measuring everything up against the grid marks and I'm making sure I have the placement right before I allow myself to straighten out all of those kind of crooked lines or get the scale of some of those shapes. So at this stage here, you'll see that I'm going back and I'm double checking. So I'm not getting details still. So this is step 2. At this step, I'm going back. I'm expecting that I had some things off, but I'm pretty sure that I have the location right. So I'm double checking the location before I start refining the scale and the shapes of some of these smaller areas. Now I am looking a little bit more closely at some of the finer details. I'm measuring things against each other. I'm measuring things up against the grid lines, and I'm making adjustments, but I'm not getting frustrated with the fact that it doesn't look perfect. You're not supposed to, and this is really hard to wrap your brain around, your drawing is not going to look perfect in the early stages. It's going to be very rough and very, very simplified. So I knew that I was going to go back and that I was going to double check my shapes. I was going to get the scale. I was going to get the curves, but I knew that that part came later. So one of the hardest things to do is to remember. It seems really simple, but it's really hard to remember, and I see students struggle with this all the time, to go back and really look at the placement and not to get upset when some things are off.
What do you mean?
I tell students all the time,
what do you mean?
I still make those mistakes, but I know that I'm going to catch them. In the beginning, if you are rushing, not rushing, but if you are only focusing on the placement, there's no way you're going to get all your shapes right, nor should you. So in the very beginning, you want to resist that temptation to get all those perfect shapes and get everything just right. Remember, you're supposed to make mistakes in the beginning. That means you are doing it absolutely right. It's when you go back and you find those mistakes that you're really, really onto something. So most people will skip that part and then go right into the coloring or go right into the shading, and then only to discover later that something was a little off. So the 3 things you really want to make yourself focus on are, number 1, in the beginning, draw only the larger shapes and get the placement before the details. Number 2, notice when you start drawing the details a little bit too soon and just catch yourself and move on to the next space. And remember that we're just trying to get the placement. And then last but not least, this is the one that I can't stress strongly enough. Go back and double check your work. Look at the spaces, line things up. This is where you are going to improve. Just don't forget that last step to go back, double check, and correct any mistakes. And that's it. So next week, stay tuned. I will show you how to layer marker and colored pencil to color in these worksheets.